There's really no way I can prove it without revealing my identity and getting myself into more trouble than I have already.
Exactly what's going on up there?
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin, and they're basically being dismantled. Some are, well, in various stages of completion, built from other parts, and they're being test flown and basically just analyzed.
I was 29 years old, working on the most incredible project in the history of the world. No one has ever been able to show exactly what I saw with my own eyes, until now. Let's travel back in time to December of 1988 when this all started.
All right, so here we are, Bob, after almost 2 years working together.
Yeah.
And the project started, pretty serious about us wanting to recreate the craft perfectly. That was the initial project. And you were very kind to say yes to work with us. You saw how serious we were in wanting to make it exactly as you saw it.
Yeah, it was impressive what you had planned. Yeah.
And it evolved. And we really built a lot. We really did a lot more than we originally thought we were going to do. It all started off with a model, and then it grew into this 3-dimensional environment, and now it turned into this real, truly realistic environment. Mm-hmm. And spending all this time together, getting it all right, and at a certain point, I said to myself, we're going to be taking people back in time to 1988 and 1989. This is exactly
right,
what
see S4
to
like
see
I
S4.
did,
Yeah, they're gonna actually experience the place exactly as you described it to us, and we built it exactly to the specifications you gave us, to the colors and sizes and
Right.
and the tools that were in there and all that. And it was so serious for a long time. We took it so seriously to make it so accurate.
It was a lot of work, a lot of corrections, and a lot of time.
Yeah, and we were so grateful that you were so helpful to work with us. You were always there. I mean, we must have had like numerous Zoom calls together and going over details, and there's so much that we covered. And it came a moment where we were thinking, how are we going to launch this? It's a serious thing, we don't want to come across as this is a cheesy project or anything. We want to make it look really cool and realistic and serious. But on the same token, we wanted to bring something a little bit lighthearted to the whole story. And I was kind of working on ideas for how we were going to launch a trailer for this. And I thought, we got to bring people back in time. And why don't we use a time machine? And I thought that was somewhat a little bit ridiculous in my head when I said that, because I said, how am I going to do that? And then I got to find out that there's a company out here in the States that rents the DeLorean time machines from Back to the Future. Mm-hmm. And I found out about them and I thought, oh, that's really cool. So I decided to reach out and just find out. I wasn't even really sure we were going to do that, but I thought, I wonder how much that's going to cost and if, this can happen. And I ended up speaking to the owner of the company. I'm not going to mention his name because I can't. And I told him, I said, well, this is kind of an odd project we're doing. We're working with a guy that is quite known out there in the public, and he's a guy that worked out at Area 51 back in the 80s, and he was apparently reverse engineering alien spacecraft. And so the guy goes, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "Are you talking about Bob Lazar?" I said, "Oh, so you know about him?" He goes, "Well," he says, "not only do I know about him," he goes, "I'm an aerospace engineer, and I actually worked at Groom Lake on a few secret space."
What are the chances?
Yeah,
right?
on a few crafts. And I was like, "What?" So I immediately called him.
On a few crafts.
On a few, not the spacecraft. So sorry,
Oh,
these were I think he gave me the
Aircraft.
names, aircrafts. Yeah, human-made aircrafts. Absolutely, yeah. But they were secret at the time, and I immediately was like, "What? Are you kidding? What are the chances of this being, a real thing?" So I reached out to him and I said, "Are you for real? Like, you really worked out there?" And he says, "Yeah." He goes, "I don't advertise it because I shouldn't. The Department of Defense doesn't want me to go out and say I did that, but I did." And he says, "But I also rent DeLorean time machines." And I thought, well, maybe this is a sign. So I thought, I wonder if this is going to be well received with the public. We want to bring the whole world back to the most accurate representation of S4 as you experienced it. And it was so serious, the work we did for so long, we kind of wanted to just come up with something cool. And so I gave you a call and I said, "Bob, I have an idea and I want to get your opinion on it." And I said to you, I said, "Well, I found the guy who has the DeLorean time machine from Back to the Future. He has it in Las Vegas. We would be able to bring it out to a dry lake bed near Area 51 or out in Nevada. Would you be interested in coming out and filming with us on a dry lake bed? And we make you drive the car and we'll just go at 88 miles an hour and we'll go back to 1988. And you just," and I said, "And you finished the sentence by saying,
Right.
I'm Bob Lazar and I'm going to take you back to 1988. And I thought, "Oh, this is cool."
Yeah, I remember the phone call. But yeah, I mean, that sounded like fun. It did. And, it's just, like you said, it's a serious topic, but, it's a fun way to introduce it. Just, I got to take you back in time here. And it was a good time.
It was
doing that. It
such
was
a good
blast,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, we got to meet so many great people while we did that. The guy that's got the car, the couple of guys that had the car. We got to bring up friends out there.
For someone from the 80s that watched all the Back to the Future, it's fun driving the car.
Yeah, it really, it was such a blast. And we were not even supposed to be able to drive it. When
Oh, really?
the deal was,
We really hauled ass in the car.
Yeah, it was. I remember the deal was we get the car out on the dry lake bed and we could take pictures. We could film you getting into the car and, starting it up, but we were not supposed to drive the car. And I think the guy himself, when he was out there, he got so excited that Bob Lazar was in the time machine that he was like, "You could go ahead. You could just don't ruin the car, because
It was full of dirt and it was destroyed by the time we were done with it.
It was so dusty. I think we
Oh, yeah.
dusted that car like 30 times.
Yeah, but still on the inside, the door jams. I mean, it's a dry lake bed. It was
Just,
terrible.
but it was such a unique experience to
it
do
was
that.
great.
And that I called you and I said, "Would you mind bringing your original MJ12 license
Oh
plate?"
yeah, that's right. We put it on the car.
Yeah. That's the one you had on your Corvette back then.
Yeah.
That's it,
Yeah.
So we took that license plate, put it on the back. They had the out of time
Yeah.
license plate, and we just put the MJ12 right on top of it. And how cool was that?
Yeah. That was a good time.
It was great. Hey guys, Luigi here from Project Gravitaur. I wanted to do a little video, give you guys an update of what's going on with our project and also what's happening with our documentary film, Lazar, the Original Whistleblower. Now, last year, we announced that we were going to launch the documentary film by the end of the first quarter of 2024. And we didn't do that. We know that it's April 2024. You guys are still waiting. We get all the comments and a lot of them being super positive, and everybody really wants to know when the movie's coming out. So first thing is this: we sincerely apologize for being late. Okay, so we know we said end of the first quarter 2024. We didn't make it. That's actually on us, mainly on me. I made some big decisions at the end of 2023 simply because we had a massive breakthrough in technology. We had been getting tons of support from people all over the world on our Instagram, YouTube. We got messages from everybody on our Facebook. People are emailing us, telling us how excited they are for this project. And we love that, man. Like, we totally love the support. We appreciate it. I can't thank you enough. The entire team gets super motivated when we see that. And when we had this breakthrough at the end of 2023, it was just like this moment where we said, we can make this even better. And people want to see this thing. We saw how incredibly excited you all were to see it, that we decided to elevate the project even more. Now, this is something that I know some of you are going to say, like, come on, just get the movie out. And believe me, we also want this thing out. But the tech we got going is crazy. So we are totally elevating the project. We made the craft better, the interior of the craft better, the look of the renders are better, the entire S4 facility looks better. We got additional interviews with Bob Lazar. I literally went back to Oregon a month ago, spent a week with Bob and his wife at his house. We got some really amazing stuff. Bob got into some really cool stuff about how they were testing the reactor in the lab, stuff that's never been heard before, the material of the craft, like super great material. We are adding that into the film. It's going to elevate the project even more. So I just wanted to say, we apologize for the delay. We thank you for the support. And I want you guys to know that this is definitely coming. We don't have a date yet. We're still talking to distributors. We're also talking to potential platforms. I can't say who. All I can tell you is we're still in negotiations, and that means we don't know how it's going to go. We don't have a lot of control on that. All we can say is that it's real. It's coming. It's better than what we initially expected it to be. We can't thank you enough for the support. We want you guys to keep following us on Instagram, YouTube, wherever you see any news from us, especially on social. We always update if we got something. And this video was specifically to let you guys know we hear you. We also want this to come out. Myself personally, I can't wait to show you guys what's coming because it's freaking amazing. Okay, so thank you. I can't say it enough. Keep following us and know that this thing is going to blow your minds. Thanks again. Take care.
There's something that the whole world missed out on throughout the ages of this story being out, is the fact that we've always focused on what Bob did at S4 or at Area 51, working on flying saucers, but there was a lot left out about who Bob Lazar actually is as a human being.
Was achieved, not that any of that would have required alien technology.
So basically, the delay happened for a lot of reasons, and the main reason was quality. As we were building the project, as we had developed S4, the entire Papoose mountain range and all that landscape around the base, we had done that all in 3D software. But the actual software was actually improving over time, and we had to make some strategic decisions. If we were to just continue with what we had created, or do we go the extra mile, spend the extra dollars, and upgrade the project? So the decision was technical, it was quality, it was for visuals, and we really hope people like the final product. The project actually was not supposed to be a documentary film, neither was it supposed to be a VR experience. Initially started out that we were going to be making a die-cast model of the flying saucer he worked on, and as this project was evolving and we were building the craft in a 3D environment, we started seeing the potential of creating the entire base. And we started building the hangar, which was super cool because now you have a real three-dimensional, physical, real size environment where this craft was parked in. We were slowly getting into the concept of maybe this is going to be a VR experience. We were not thinking film. And we said, well, we could bring people back to 1988 with a time machine.
The sleek, stainless steel DeLorean.
At a certain point, I saw an ad come up on my computer that there's this company in the United States that rents DeLorean time machines from Back to the Future. So when we finally rented the car, we all went out to Las Vegas. The whole production crew here, Bob and his wife, all flew out to Las Vegas, and we all drove out into the desert, and we ended up on this huge dry lake in the middle of nowhere. The guy who owns the car was there because he wanted to make sure we were not going to break the car, because we were only supposed to like drive it really slow, like 10 miles an hour. And we thought, this is just not good enough. We need something better. And he eventually gave us the okay. And as soon as that happened, it was like a turning point for the whole project. We knew at that moment that we had the opportunity to create a documentary film. The shots we had were just way too good. Bob's a very, very down-to-earth, kind, gentle soul. Like, he's a good guy. You get to meet him, you see a different side of what you kind of read about a lot out there. So, I mean, this is not a person who just did that back in '88 and '89. This is a man who was in charge of a big event called Desert Blast for many, many years in Nevada. Whenever you're reading about Bob Lazar on the internet, it's just always gravitating to what he did at S4. But one of the things that I can say is he's an awesome person, very kind, very honest, very credible. What he's done with us is the generosity of his time, the generosity of providing us the information. I mean, he's always been cooperative. He's never stopped helping us. He's always been there at any moment we needed him. So that part of Bob Lazar is going to translate. I can say it here in this interview, but you'll also see it in the film. The VFX evolved in such an incredible way. I mean, we started off with the basics of 3D. So the last 3 years have been paramount in the world of 3D, specifically in cinematics, things that you could use in actual film, and not just video games or 3D virtual reality experiences. So the evolution of it is paramount to what we actually saw in the results of the project. The biggest thing was how we went about creating the textures for the craft. Regardless of how amazing this technology is that allows us to do all this, the craft itself was a very difficult build that we had to do. It was the most challenging. First of all, the craft itself, although it looks like it's made of metal, there is a specific look we were aiming for. Bob had explained exactly what this thing looked like, how it didn't have too much reflectivity, but it still had a little bit. There were a little bit of usage on it, but it looked pretty new. But when you're creating that in a virtual environment, there's a very complicated situation when you're in proximity to the object and when you go further away. Every time we were close up, it was perfect. As soon as we would go further away from the object, it would start looking like a cartoon. So we had a lot of trouble with that. And the evolution of what we were developing inside the softwares, along with coming up with the best textures and mixing them together, creating our own textures, I would say that was the biggest challenge at a certain point. We couldn't get that craft to look real. From a distance, up close, it always looked amazing. And we finally got that after 2 years. We had to actually write our own programs, either tools that were customized by our team inside some of those programs, or actual softwares that we created. So one of them is the de-aging Bob Lazar software, which was completely done in-house. Although he's a pretty well-known figure out there, there's not a lot of stuff back in the 80s with Bob. So we had to write the software ourselves to actually utilize the limited amount of data that was out there to recreate him as a younger Bob today. So that was a really cool thing. There was a lot of, challenges have been every single day, whether they be physical challenges. Did we have the right shot? Did we get the right angle? Like anybody who's in filming knows what that's all about. Sometimes you're dealing with cinematic challenges. In terms of the softwares and how we were blending real live action with CG, that's a challenge, because what we want to do is make sure that it's a seamless transition, that you do not see when it goes from real to not real, basically a 3D environment. I think that probably is the most challenging thing and time consuming as well, but the result is absolutely incredible. The whole project, well, the whole movie was shot out in the Nevada desert. We actually shot on a dry lake with the DeLorean. We then went out to Area 51 at the back gate where we shot there with the DeLorean as well. We went out to Rachel, Nevada. A lot of interviews were done in Las Vegas. We did that with Mario Santa Cruz, Gene Huff, George Knapp. We actually went to George Knapp's house. That was really, really fun. Got to meet George, got to experience a whole bunch of cool stuff that he had at his place with Bob. And then Bob Lazar came here to Montreal, which is a huge, huge production that we did right here in this studio, where we had him on a green screen. We had him in different locations interviewing him about everything that happened at S4. Spending time with Bob was not just like 1 or 2 shoots. I mean, this is almost like a 3-year project. It's like incredible to have had that experience, but I also got to understand who he really is. So did the team. I mean, we spent days together, we traveled together.
I get so excited.
Well, this is great.
That's the smartest, biggest kid you'll ever meet in your life.
I mean, if you really want to see Bob's soul come to life, you also have to see him in his lab, in his work environment, where he's playing around with things that we usually don't see people doing. And he's so good at this. He's very careful, very methodical. He's a professional at it. And it's impressive to see that. And you can see his true passion is working with chemicals, working with explosives, working with uranium. I mean, this is something that you could see. This is who he really is. I can't stress enough how it was important to show the true Bob Lazar in all this. This is something that we experienced, and we felt as this was happening that we had to bring this to the public, to the audience. So thanks again. We're going to be giving you a ton of information about what's to come. Definitely like and subscribe to this channel, because there's definitely a lot of cool stuff on the way. I started off in this UFO field back in 1987. I became the youngest member in the world of MUFON. My grandfather had seen a flying saucer back in 1965 and got me really intrigued on what he saw. So that's what really started my whole interest in the field. I believed him. He wasn't somebody who make up a story like that. He's a very conservative Catholic Italian man who doesn't talk about flying saucers. Eventually became a member of MUFON. After many, many years, I became the national director of MUFON for Canada. So I was kind of in charge of all investigations of UFOs, UAPs across Canada. I kind of decided to take a step back and try to bring something a little bit different to the field. I felt that there was a little bit of empathy that needed to happen in terms of people who've had contact or have had close encounters with either craft or, believe it or not, beings of some type. And I founded We Are Not Alone, which is the WANA movement, W-A-N-A. So that's where all this came from. Been doing that now for about 6 years. And our first official project of WANA is the project Gravitaur, which is with Bob Lazar. The whole story started in 2021. I had an idea to create a professional model of a flying saucer. I wanted something that would be like a collector quality representation of what people have seen for decades. And I thought, you know, there's a lot of people who've seen them, but not a lot of people who've seen the interior of them. And the people who allegedly saw the interior of them, a lot of them were people who didn't actually dismantle the craft. So they might have had an experience, a really weird one, that they might have been taken up on a craft, but not anybody who's actually had hands-on, except for Bob Lazar. When he came out and explained that he was working on reverse engineering this technology, and he was actually given, you know, access to the interior of the craft and start dismantling the thing, that was huge. So I thought, why not make the Bob Lazar craft, like the sport model that he worked on? And so I took a chance, and I knew that it was going to be a really long shot because he said that he didn't want to have a lot of people reach out to him.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Really, don't come and try to visit me.
I just could imagine the amount of people trying to reach out to him. And I contacted United Nuclear, the company that he and his wife run. And I spoke to Zach, who's his guy at United Nuclear. And I said, you know, my name is Luigi. I have a company out in Montreal, been in merchandising for a long time, and I'm interested in doing this flying saucer. I could do this probably with information that's online, but it would be so much cooler if I did it with Bob Lazar and we would have his seal of approval on it. Zach said, I'll see, you know, I can't guarantee you anything. And I think it was a day or two later, I get a call and he says, you know, Bob will talk to you if you want to have a conversation. I thought, that's great. And so we ended up on a call, and on that first call, I remember Bob was interviewing me, you know, like, what have you done, and how would you do this, and why do you want to do this? Because obviously this was something we wanted to do on our side, and we just were going to use his information. So he wanted to make sure that we were not going to do something that was not representative of what he saw. And I guess he got appeased with my answers. He realized I knew what I was doing and how to make stuff. And he says, all right, he goes, you could come and see me. I'll tell you what this is all about. So that's how it all started. When I finally got to spend time with Bob, it was incredible because we spent very quiet time, just him and I sitting at a table with diagrams and you know, all sorts of stuff on the table. We had sample materials of different types of metals and colors and textures, and we had rulers and measurements, and we were building a craft together, which was the coolest experience because I'm building a flying saucer with Bob Lazar. It was clear at that moment that this was going to be a little bit more than just a die-cast model. I knew that, but I didn't know how. I didn't really know where it was going, but I just felt something at that moment. And went back, met my team. We built a whole book on the craft itself. And I think that whole project took a massive turn when we started using 3D technology to build a craft. And that's when we saw the potential of not just building the craft, but the environment that it was in. I wanted to make a box that looked like the hangar where this die-cast model would be, and create a box that looked like the hangar. And then we thought, well, why don't we just build a hangar for real and see what it will look like? And then Bob got involved in helping us build a hangar. And then he said, well, why don't we just go nuts? Why don't we just build the whole site, like all of S4? So I asked Bob, I said, would you be willing to help us and guide us if we decided to open the budgets and do that? And after a while, he said, sure. And that's how this whole thing went into creating S4, all the crafts that are in there, Papoose Lake, the whole landscape out there, all the way to Groom Lake. So this is really one hell of a project. The 80s are, in my opinion, well, it's my favorite decade. And incidentally, I asked Bob one time, I said, what's your favorite decade? And he said the 80s, by far. 80s were incredible. I mean, there's so many iconic things that happened back then, so many movies that came out regarding this. I mean, E.T., there was Star Wars, Predator. This is all alien stuff. Then you got movies like The Terminator, Back to the Future, obviously a big deal with what we're doing as well. And that inspired me when I was younger And because the story of Bob Lazar happened in the 1980s, it happened in 1988 and 1989, I felt that that was just like the perfect mix. It was like the inspiration to this story. Because it's also important to bring people back to that era. This is an era of neon lights and iconic music, and people like Michael Jackson and AC/DC were coming out into the world. This changed society in a way. I mean, there's a lot of iconic things that came out of the 80s, and this story is so incredible. I mean, it's probably one of the most famous stories in the field of flying saucers, and it all relates back to the 80s. So obviously my love for the 80s, with the cool stuff that came from that era, with the fact that this story happened then, all coalesced all together to create the perfect storm. For one thing, this is my first rodeo in making a documentary film. I'm extremely humbled when I speak to friends or people who've had the experience of making a film before. I needed the help. I obviously knew about the topic. I knew about the story of Bob Lazar. I knew about everything that needs to be known about the actual data about what we're covering, but I've never made a movie. So this is something that was really a challenge for me. I'm almost 50 years old and I'm doing something completely brand new. I'm not afraid of the challenges. Obviously I took this on, but I have to say the success of this project is 100% also because of the team. I mean, Christopher, Matto, Romain Dros, Veronica, Vanessa, Emily, all the people that are on the team are absolutely important to how this went about. Plus I got to speak to friends of mine who made movies. They were giving me, you know, suggestions, and I'm still learning, and I think it's one of the most incredible projects I've ever done. I'm very fortunate to have been doing this. I consider this to be a life lesson for me as well. I'm learning, and I hope that whatever comes out of it, everybody likes. The main inspiration was the fact that I recognized the importance of this story. And if you look at what's been going on in this field, I mean, I've been involved in it for almost 3.5 decades of my life. And the story of Bob Lazar never changed. He's somebody who's very controversial. A lot of people like him, a lot of people don't like him. But at the end of the day, if you look at everything that's been happening in the last 6 to 7 years since the 2017 New York Times article that came out regarding the US Navy pilots, we're seeing congressional hearings, we're seeing new whistleblowers coming out. They're talking about things that Bob Lazar talked about in 1989. One thing that I have to also add is the fact that his story has had enormous amount of support from science, even though science doesn't like to say that. And these were things that were happening in different years, and as that story was getting more and more support, a lot of people were changing their outlook about Bob Lazar. They were saying, maybe this guy, you know, is not lying. And then you have these new congressional hearings coming out, new whistleblowers talking about the fact that the government has intact craft in their possession and they're reverse engineering that. Well, that's something Bob said 35 years ago. So I thought, this story is far too important. This information about the United States government and their potential defense contractors working on extraterrestrial technology and keeping it secret from the rest of the world is big. That's a big deal. And if we are to give it a little bit more value and elevate the story, what better is to recreate it with the person who saw it. And so that we can the whole world can see, because we're obviously not getting a good view from the government. Nobody's coming out saying, voila, here it is. So the only way for us to do that is to get Bob Lazar to tell us what exactly did it look like, work closely with him to build those assets, build that equipment, build the craft. And so the world can actually see it for the first time, exactly like Bob Lazar saw. So I think that's absolutely paramount that was done. There's a lot of different types of equipment. So there's hardware, obviously, and hardware is the cameras that we use and lighting that we use and the stuff that we brought out in the desert, but also the actual computers that we built in-house that I would consider to be very important in terms of the tools to make this film. A lot of it is VFX. So there's incredible cinematic shots that we've done on our computers, and those computers had to have been created basically from scratch internally to accommodate the amount of data that they would be processing. So these are not run-of-the-mill machines that you would just go out and buy. These are really powerful machines that were specifically designed for creating 3D renders and 3D cinematics. So they were fundamental to the success of this project. And I think that all of that is going to show when you get it all together. I mean, even one of the things that we could do in our 3D environment is replicate the same hardware that we have physically, and we can put it in the 3D environment, which is super cool. And I cannot wait for you guys to see it. So thanks again. We're going to be giving you a ton of information about what's to come. Definitely like and subscribe to this channel, because there's definitely a lot of cool stuff on the way. Bob Lazar is one of the most controversial figures in the community of UFOs and UAPs and flying saucers. He came out publicly in 1989 through KLAS TV in Las Vegas, claiming that he had been hired by the United States government to reverse engineer alien spacecraft in a remote location in the Nevada desert called Area 51. That story became a worldwide sensation back then and still is today. Lazar is without a doubt the original whistleblower. He's the first person who came out telling the world that the United States government had intact spacecrafts from another civilization. I spent a lot of time with Bob Lazar in the last 3 years. This is a man who is without a doubt a scientist. Bob Lazar is also somebody that works with very dangerous materials every single day, whether that be with radioactive uranium all the way to high-powered explosives. In fact, back in the 1990s, Bob was in charge of a big event in Nevada called Desert Blast. That went on for many, many years. This initially started off being just a group of friends that went out to a dry lake in the middle of the desert to blow up beautiful fireworks and bombs, and eventually became one of the largest events out in the desert at that time. And there were literally thousands of people that would show up. Regardless of the amount of people that would be there, you needed a very special invitation to show up at Desert Blast. That was a big part of his life, and that also is something that we discussed a lot while we were together. That also showed me a completely different side of Bob Lazar, which is something that we don't always hear about when we hear his name. He's an incredibly jovial type of person. He has an incredible sense of humor. He's a very warm-hearted person, very caring person. I spent a lot of time with him and his wife at their home. They have horses, dogs, cats, and this incredible bird sanctuary. And he's very affectionate with the animals. He's a wonderful husband. And he's also somebody who I consider to be a great friend. He's been under a lot of attacks over the years, and a lot of people have said a lot of things about Bob Lazar. Having spent a lot of time with him, his friends, and his family, it was clear to me that Bob Lazar is somebody who is extremely honest and somebody who really has great values. I do understand some of the frustration out there because parts of the story cannot be verified. That's completely understandable. In fact, when I spoke to Bob about that many times, he always said, I never thought people would believe my story. He said, in fact, I wouldn't believe my own story. He said, there's no evidence really to substantiate some of the claims that I've said. He always says it, healthy skepticism is really important. We need to get to the bottom of this. And he's also very much supportive of people who don't believe the story, because he says we need them to try to gain more traction into finding out what's really going on behind the scenes. He says it doesn't take away the fact that I did work out there. I remember having a really close conversation with Bob while we were driving, and he said, it doesn't really matter what people think, and it doesn't really matter what is written out there about me. This is something that happened to me, whether they like it or not. And if they don't want to believe it, that's fine. That kind of translated a lot over time when I was with Bob. It's something that struck a chord with me because I never really saw something that was non-genuine with him. I always felt there was a lot of genuine feelings and emotions there.
I mean, what happened? Where did they take it? Did they, really get a grasp on some of the technology? It's, decades later. Did they make any more developments? Did they, figure out what everything did? And, I mean, we were pretty much in the dark at that time, but I'm really dying to know how far the project went.
So it's important to remember that Bob Lazar is not just a flying saucers guy that worked at S4 back in the late 1980s. There's a lot more to the man and a lot more to the story. I spent 3 years with him, and I decided to shed a whole new light on who the real Bob Lazar is in the new film S4, The Bob Lazar Story. And I cannot wait to show it to everybody. Project Gravitaur is going to take you guys inside of S4. So what is S4? Well, back in '88 and '89, Bob Lazar was hired by the United States Department of Naval Intelligence and brought to this secret facility 15 miles southwest of Area 51 within the Area 51 compound to reverse engineer alien technology. This was a facility that was built into the side of the mountain adjacent to Papoose Lake. Inside this facility, Bob was brought in and was introduced to some of the most advanced technologies ever seen by humankind. He was asked to work on the reverse engineering of the propulsion system of this technology. There seemed to be a lot of other people working there, but he did not have access to them. According to what he saw, S4 only had 22 people working on the projects that were there. S4 was operating 3 known projects: Project Galileo, which is the power and propulsion that Bob Lazar was responsible for; Project Sidekick, that had to do with weapons applications; and Project Looking Glass, which had to do with time dilation. There was a lot of information that was given to him when he first got there, information that was written in these blue folders that he was asked to read, that described some of the most controversial stuff he had ever seen and that we've ever heard of. Information on crafts from a different star system, technology from a different species, a different civilization, and the fact that the United States government was in charge of a program to reverse engineer this technology. From the outside, what he saw were these camouflaged large bay doors in the side of the mountain, which he found out later to be the hangar doors. He initially was brought into the first hangar, which they called the main hangar, or the large hangar. This is where he first saw the sport model flying saucer that he was working on. At first he thought this was not extraterrestrial or non-human. He thought this was just a simple high-tech fighter that was created by the United States military. And one of the reasons why he thought that is because there was a reversed American flag sticker on the craft. The facility was quite large. At one time, when he came out of the lab, all the adjacent doors in each hangar were open, and he was able to see the size and the scope of where he was. This was a gigantic facility. From what he understood, there was a total of 9 hangars in there. Each one had a craft of some type. He was able to work on the sport model, which was in the main hangar, the first hangar. He got a clear view of the adjacent hangar, which had a jello mold type of craft, and the following hangar, which looked like a craft that looked like a top hat propped up on its side. He was also able to see other crafts, but they were far too distant for him to make out shape or form. What we can say, and what he does remember, is that he could see how incredibly large the facility was. This also coincided with the fact that the main hallway within the facility was extremely long, which was basically almost an infinity hallway that was adjacent to all the hangars. You will see that in our project, that we've recreated the entire facility exactly as Bob Lazar witnessed it when he was there. So in the making of S4, we also used a lot of different data sets specifically for the landscape and all the terrain that is around the Papoose Mountain area and Papoose Lake. A lot of the satellite data that we received goes back all the way to the 1970s, all the way to recent data that comes from different points. Some of the satellite data that we use is actually also sourced out of Russia, which provided us a lot more detail, surprisingly, than some of the American satellite data. How we went about getting that, that's another story. On top of that, we also had to work really carefully in developing the elevations and the topology out there, because most of the data that we have today does not provide us any elevation or accurate topology specifically where S4 is located right by Papoose Lake. So if you kind of look at what you see today in that environment, whether you're on Google Earth or Apple Maps, whatever it is, you will actually not really see the elevation accurately versus the true satellite data. So that was a really interesting way of developing the terrain, and we wanted to make it as accurate as possible so it recreates the real environment. On top of that, by getting the accurate topology and elevations, it allowed us to properly integrate the creation of the S4 facility that was created in the 3D environment within the topology. So when we actually built this facility, we built it outside of the environment based on the measurements and the information that we got from Bob. Once we had to integrate the building itself inside the mountain, that was a little bit of a challenge because we had to make sure that it matched at least what it should have been back then, and it did. So we were able to fit the facility inside the accurate topology, and it provided us the exact length of the entire facility, also how it kind of tapered into this little enclosure in the mountain by Papoose Lake where the main entrance was. So the entire facility was actually built and put into the accurate topology. So it is literally as close to reality as you can get. We created the nurse station where he was initially brought to do an allergy test and to also drink this type of liquid that gave him a stomach ache. We recreated the briefing room where he was asked to read up and get updated on all these briefing documents that they had, a lot of them stamped top secret with the US Navy logo on it. We recreated the propulsion lab where he worked with his partner Barry Castillo in attempting to reverse engineer the reactor and figure out how that reactor functioned. That was the main power source to the craft that he was working on. And we built the hangar and all the adjacent hangars and crafts that were there. The only crafts that we actually replicated from his memory are the sport model in absolute detail, except for the upper level that he never had access to, the jello mold, and the top hat. The other crafts that were there, we used creative liberties because he did not have an opportunity to really make out what they looked like. Everything was recreated according to his memory. We basically researched every possible detail in terms of the equipment that was in there, the tools that were in there, and anything that could have been existing at the time in the late 1980s. The floodlights, the extension cords, the generators, the portable x-ray machines, the oscilloscopes, the workbenches, the tools, everything was studied and analyzed carefully so that we would be able to recreate this to the most accurate detail so that when you get access to S4 for the first time, see exactly what the reverse engineering program looked like back in 1988 and 1989 at S4. So there's a lot of information that you will get in our film and in our VR experience that has to do with what Bob saw. Anything else that happened at S4 remains unknown. So at first, it'll be in a documentary film, and following that will be a VR experience. You will finally get to see the interior of S4, probably one of the most secret locations on planet Earth. The VFX in Project Gravitaur have become extremely important. And this is something that we've invested a tremendous amount of time and resources in the past 3 years. This was initially not supposed to be a documentary film, neither was it supposed to be a VR experience, but it certainly has become that. And since we made that decision, we're all in.
So what really excited me about working on this project is when we're talking about the documentary space, you know, there's not a lot of innovations in the VFX department and how the stories are being told. We really wanted to push the envelope in the documentary space and make this like something very unique. I mean, what better way than to completely recreate something that you're not able to go to or see? You may think it's easy to do a military facility, but it's not, because there's so many little tiny things that Bob remembers. Colors of the wall and what the walls look like and the little grit, you know, how much dirt and is there dirt or not. I mean, I feel terrible for Bob because this happened 35 years ago for him.
J'ai beaucoup travaillé sur la recréation du landscape, qui a été un des plus gros challenges pour ce projet, puisque nous n'avions pas de photographie ou de références précises du site, étant donné que personne n'y avait accès. Donc une grosse partie de ce travail a été de la recherche de références pour savoir quel type de sable, comment est le terrain, quelles sont les roches, la végétation. Nous avons donc créé une scène complète avec tout l'environnement de S4, Papoose Lake et toutes les montagnes qui sont autour, grâce aux données satellites que nous avons pu récupérer pour créer la vraie élévation du terrain et retranscrire au mieux la réalité de cet environnement.
So you're going to get to see some of the most incredible visuals ever in this field in terms of documentary film footage. I'm super proud of the team. Each individual has expertise in different fields in 3D and design. So that really helped. And I hope that you guys see all that in the work.
The biggest challenge was definitely the progression and the adapting to new technologies and being pushed to bring up the quality and visuals of the project incrementally over those months and years. Like if you guys saw, you know, I mean, what we had at the very beginning, what we had in the middle, which we thought at the time was great, and then what we ended with, and the quality and the animations and the visual effects that we didn't even know that we were able to do is just something that we're really proud of. We're a small team, and so we can't do the same workflows and things as Marvel Studios or Paramount Pictures. The challenge was every time we upgraded, we basically had to reinvent the wheel internally at the office. And what that meant was coming up with our own software. And that doesn't just mean software like Unreal or your default 3D engines, whatever you use, Blender or 3ds Max, but the tools that you develop to accelerate that workflow.
Le matériau du craft a été très intéressant, mais aussi très dur à retranscrire visuellement, puisque d'après la description de Bob, cela réfléchissait comme un métal, mais pas vraiment. Ça a été une grosse difficulté de rendre ça crédible, puisque dans la réalité, ce n'est pas un matériau que nous pouvons voir. Donc il y a eu beaucoup d'essais pour cette partie-là, puisque à partir d'une certaine distance, la réalité du matériau semblait différente. Donc ça a été un gros challenge de pouvoir trouver une solution à ce problème et de retranscrire au mieux visuellement la description du craft.
So that's where a lot of these inspirations to create these tools come in, is just we keep getting roadblocks and we keep slamming through and breaking those roadblocks. So like digitally de-aging Bob. You know, we know that we really wanted to have a creative way to show Bob Lazar in the environment, and that's like, okay, well, we want to make Bob Lazar go and explain all these things. And so we thought, okay, well, when we need to make a 3D model of young Bob. But we weren't really happy with the results because you get that uncanny valley, you know, you get some issues here and there. So we're like, okay, well, let's take real pictures of Bob and just digitally de-age an actor. And that kind of came out pretty nice, and we were really happy because there's way more liberty and way more control on how we wanted to animate it and how we want to present it in the environment. And that's kind of like the steps that we took whenever we run into an issue.
On m'a demandé, écoute, tu fais à peu près la même taille que Bob, est-ce que ça te dirait d'essayer de faire des tests? Très intéressante comme expérience, très fun.
One of the best moments of this project was showing Bob the facility on the VR headset for that first time. And it's a little different than seeing screenshots or seeing animations because VR is way more immersive. And we had brought down a little demo when we flew down to Vegas to film. We had Bob put on the headset for the first time and just get completely blown away. And seeing him kind of light up and be like, hey man, I want this on my computer right now. Like, can you guys send that to me? And I don't think there's a better reward as an artist, having that result of him saying it's exactly like I remember it is an incredible feeling.
So as you can see, the team is extremely dedicated to making these products extremely successful, whether that be the documentary film S4, the Bob Lazar story, or whether that be the VR experience, S4, the experience, and eventually the book. The work that has been put in with my team is incredible. I'm extremely proud and humbled to have amazing people like that in the team, and we cannot wait to show it to you. So as Project Gravitaur really started building up, we had to get the right equipment to film everything we had to do, because we had to get specific type of cinecams that would have been able to provide the right results for the movie and the right visuals that we needed to have, which would have matched up also with some of our VFX components in the film, the right lighting equipment that we use obviously in the studio, or we would have brought out to the desert or out in the mountains of Oregon. The drone, the mics, everything had to be carefully selected so that we would have everything we needed on the fly wherever we would go to film. So this is something that we had to film obviously here in the studio. We filmed out in the mountains of Oregon, in the deserts of Nevada, in Las Vegas, at Bob's house. I mean, there was so many different places, and we had to travel with all this equipment. So the selection of the equipment was something that took a little bit of time. Luckily, I have amazing people on the team that were able to help. This is the first time I did that, so I learned a lot about what kind of equipment was needed.
This is us not having a life right now, okay? Yeah.
It's good. We're almost there.
We're almost there. We're getting there.
Another big task was bringing all the equipment out to Dry Lake in the middle of Nevada. The challenges were completely different whether it was daytime or nighttime. So the daytime challenges had a lot to do with a tremendous amount of wind out there and a lot of dust. And at nighttime, obviously, there's no light in the middle of the desert. So we had to get generators. We had a motorhome out there full of equipment and power that we could plug into. We had all our cameras, our lights, our equipment. We had to set up a whole bunch of scenes out in the desert. We had fuel tanks to fill up the generators. We had a motorhome, multiple different vehicles, including the DeLorean was out there. Bob, his wife, the whole cast, they weren't just sitting there. Everybody kind of pitched in and we all helped each other out. So that was something that we really enjoyed doing.
Ready? Action.
On top of that, we had our drone out there, and that was something that was a big challenge in the day because we wanted to get some really kick-ass drone shots of the DeLorean, but we had to fight this extreme wind out in the desert. So that was a little bit of a challenge at times because we didn't have a big drone because we were traveling with it. Plus, we had to stay within regulations. So the smaller the drone, the better it is. Otherwise, you get in trouble, and we had to really do with what we had.
Hi, I'm Viv. This is Marty.
Another big point about equipment and all that is traveling with all that stuff. So it's not just a question of having the cameras, the lights, the batteries, all that stuff. Batteries is a big thing when you're traveling. It's a huge component of all the equipment. You got to carry so many batteries, especially if you're going somewhere where there's nowhere to plug in. How to bring all this effectively and make sure we had everything we needed, because once we would be in certain places, that's all we had. So it was really important to make sure that we had all our equipment and enough food, enough water, you know, anything we needed for the whole crew and the team while we were out there. And one of the biggest challenges as well was bringing the DeLorean time machine out in the desert on the Dry Lake, because there are no roads that lead to the Dry Lake. The way to get to the Dry Lake was pretty much off-road. So we went off-roading with a DeLorean time machine prior to getting to the lake. So let me tell you, that was one hell of a trip.
I got
Mario in the back, and the greatest chauffeur ever.
Also, when we traveled to Oregon, it was important to spend a lot of time with Bob, to film him doing just regular stuff that he does every day, whether those things were regular house chores or responsibilities that they have, him and his wife, with the barn, the horses, the animals, or him in his lab doing some really cool work that he did every single day in there. And there was like different sections of the lab where he had different projects going on. That was super interesting to film Bob in his element, where you could really see that that's exactly what he loves to do when he's working with uranium here. He's working with specific laser equipment on one other side of the lab, and he's creating really cool scientific projects that I can't get into in some cases in other parts of the lab. So that was really fun to be there and to see that happen, and to be able to film it and spend time with Bob in those environments. Also, while we were out in Oregon, we had the opportunity to film with a fan. This is somebody who had reached out to us quite a while back, and he was really excited about Project Gravitaur, what we were doing with Bob. And this particular person is struggling with a very serious health issue. It turned out that he didn't live very far away from where Bob lives, so we arranged to all meet together out in Oregon. We had a beautiful day together, and we filmed with him. So that's also going to be in the film, and you'll probably like to see that piece. It's also important to know that Bob was not invited to testify at the congressional hearing, but to be there in attendance. But the fact that he was already scheduled to come to Montreal and film with us made him take the plane to Montreal and not to Washington, D.C. That was really interesting when he told us that. So while we were in Montreal, we had an opportunity to really do a lot of different types of scenarios with Bob, and a lot of them also had to do with the green screen. So we set up a gigantic green environment in the studio, which was sufficiently large for him to be walking, whether it be from one side of the studio to the other, or even coming towards us. We had the green screen come all the way towards the camera area. So that allowed us to have a tremendous amount of volume area where Bob was essentially mimicking being out at Papoose Lake while they were doing the test of the craft, or if he was inside the hangar looking at the craft, explaining what he was looking at. So that was certainly one of the best filming environments that we had him in. And that's gonna also be translated into our film, where you're actually gonna see Bob Lazar at S4 inside our VFX scenes. Another great thing is when Bob came to Montreal, obviously we had a lot of people that wanted to meet Bob. And one of those people was George St. Pierre. I was able to arrange through a very good friend of mine who's a producer. Her name is Guylaine Marois. She does a lot of work here in Quebec and in Canada. So when Guylaine reached out to GSP to invite him, apparently he was really happy and really excited to meet Bob Lazar. So that was something that I was kind of happy that his response was really positive. He wanted to meet him. And I'll never forget when he showed up and he said, you know, if I would have been asked to meet anybody in the world, he says Bob Lazar would have been the first on my list, which was really amazing. They kind of now communicate. I've connected them, and now they've kind of become friends, which is a really cool thing. So overall, it's been an incredible success, in our opinion, of all the stuff that we've accomplished in the last 3 years in terms of production. We have over 30 hours of footage with Bob, which we're selecting for our documentary, and we really cannot wait to show you guys what this is going to be all about.
Hi, I'm Bob Lazar. In December of 1988, I was hired as a senior staff physicist by a U.S. defense contractor called EG&G Special Projects. I was told that I would be working on an advanced propulsion system out in a remote area of the Nevada test site, known as Area 51. Wanting to protect myself, I decided to go public and reveal the secrets of S4.
Well, there's actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
He is not your typical straight-laced science guy. If you wanted to hire a guy who could think out of the box and help solve problems, Bob was probably the best person in the country at the time. He was perfect for it. People are catching on that what Bob said is true.
Physical evidence now exists which proves that there is life elsewhere, and at least one form of that life has been here.
It was exactly like disarming a bomb. Every single day.
He was targeted.
And I saw the guy with the gun.
I was willing to fire back.
These briefings contained a wide spectrum of information, mostly relating to aliens and alien technology.
The people that have been keeping these secrets for a long time are not going to give this stuff up.
No one has ever been able to show exactly what I saw with my own eyes. Until now. The information we're getting now is going to come to an end. The slightest wrong move could release a tremendous amount of energy.
To start up the reactor, of course, we need some element 115.
But he had a piece of it, and I don't care whether people believe it or not.
Actually went up in the air like this.
Be here and suddenly be here.
We don't know where they came from.
This is my husband, Bob.
He didn't believe in flying saucers.
ALSAP becomes ATIP. ATIP gets on the front page of the New York Times. It leads to congressional hearings. It leads to Dave Grush. All the stuff that's unfolding right now traces back to Bob Lazar.
For years, Bob Lazar's story has been riddled in controversy and has challenged what we think we know about extraterrestrial life and its technology. We're proud to announce the official name of our documentary film being S4, The Bob Lazar Story. This groundbreaking documentary film is produced entirely by our team at Project Gravitaur. This documentary offers a rare glimpse into the secret reverse engineering program that was underway back in 1988 and 1989, and we invite you to be part of that story. After years of meticulous and hard work, I'm excited to present the official movie poster of our documentary film called S4, The Bob Lazar Story. Crafted to capture the realism of what Bob experienced back at the secret installation in 1988 and 1989. The film and poster reflect the ominous and eerie atmosphere Bob Lazar described during his time at S4, a visually striking glimpse into one of the most secret operations ever known. Each poster is a high-quality screen print, officially dated and signed, truly a first edition collector's piece. To ensure authenticity, every poster features an official Project Gravitaur hologram, solidifying its status as an exclusive must-have piece for any serious collector. Available in 3 sizes, each poster comes with a certificate of authenticity. For a limited time only, Bob Lazar will personally hand-sign these first edition posters. This is a one-time event, and when it's gone, it's gone. Order the official movie theater size poster to receive even more exclusive collectibles, including behind-the-scenes photos, prints, and more. Every poster features a QR code at the bottom right corner. Scan it to unlock exclusive behind-the-scenes footage that updates periodically. Your poster becomes a portal to the latest from Project Gravitaur. The truth is closer than you think. And this summer, the secrets of S4
will be revealed to you like you've never seen before.
Our documentary film poster is finally out. S4, the Bob Lazar story, is finally going to be launching this summer of 2025. The poster comes equipped with something really exclusive that we developed right here in our studio. Each poster has an individual QR code in the bottom right corner. By using your phone, you scan the QR code, it'll open up a link, you click on that link and point your phone to the poster. That will open up a portal for you to get exclusive behind-the-scenes footage of everything that's been happening and everything that is happening with Project Gravitaur. And those are going to be some of the most exclusive things that will only be available through here. Basically, as we progress with the project and get closer to the launch of the film, we periodically update that link so you could go check out the QR code and see new exclusive behind-the-scenes footage. So check out our poster and don't forget to click on the QR code.